help them sleep. And I've just been part of a sleep trial at the hospital because did one of those. Yeah, I did an initial test and I was waking 57 times an hour, and the average is between, I think it's 5 and 7 times an hour.
Waking.
So I just So I'm awake less. I'm awake almost for part of a minute every hour.
Wow.
But anyway, but the big thing is losing weight. So I've lost quite a bit of weight, but I'm still sleeping like crap. So I think I think it is about modern life. You said that, Tim. I think exercise is the thing I need to do now, but I won't be reverting to any antipsychotic drugs. It's hard enough to get out of bed in the morning anyway. If I started taking something like that, I'd never get up.
I think exercise, minimise alcohol, don't have devices. That sounds dodgy. Don't have devices in the bedroom. So don't have iPads and iPhones in the bedroom if you can avoid it.
A few people have texted to say that they don't have devices in the bedroom.
That's good to know.
I'm going to move on rapidly to a new bishop coming in Christchurch down your way, Ali. Tomorrow the Anglicans gather, today and tomorrow in fact, to vote on a new bishop to replace Victoria Matthews, who left the post in May. Most of you probably know Matthews for her stance in favour of demolishing the Christchurch Cathedral. Of course, despite her views, a synod vote in September backed restoration. $35 million of public money is going into this. Ali, I imagine you have some thoughts on what should happen here.
Yeah, well, I don't think a new bishop's really going to influence a great deal.
It's locked in now.
Yeah, well, look, there's been a board established. It's headed by a local man, Justin Murray. There are some really good people on that board. It's a joint venture between the Anglican Church Property Trustees, which manage the cathedral, and the government. We know it's going to take 7 to 10 years to build, and they are rebuilding it. That was agreed by the synod in September. It would be very dangerous for anyone to come in and think that they are bigger than this issue, and I think that's maybe something Bishop Matthews learnt too late on, I think, in the piece.
Look, I'm just looking at the time because it's coming up to 3 minutes to 5, so we're almost out of time, but very quickly before we go, it's a good way to end on Friday. The world's oldest cheese has been found in an Egyptian tomb. Well, so Italian researchers think. These are the clues: a solid white mass. The solid white mass that contains proteins from cow milk, sheep or goat milk. It was found in a jar with canvas fabric alongside it. It was a 13th century tomb from a mayor of Memphis in Egypt. What do you think, panellists? Would you eat 13th century cheese?
I probably wouldn't go back quite that far.
No, aging is good.
A couple of months is probably as far as I go. But how fascinating.
Isn't that great?
Did it smell, I wonder?
I don't know.
Oh, it must have been past it. It must have been petrified, surely.
Well, what scientists did find is evidence of a potentially deadly bacteria in the sample. So
there's your answer. You
don't want to eat it.
No.
But go on, Ellie.
No, I was just going to say there's this awesome cheese stall at the Riccarton House Market here in Christchurch at the weekends, and the lovely Italian lady, I can't remember her name, she sells a lot of Italian cheeses, and she had this blue cheese that was just running off this board that she had, and it did smell a little bit like smelly socks, but absolutely delicious. So, there are cheeses I'd eat, but certainly not 13th century cheese with bacteria in it.
You've got to love smelly cheese. Yeah.
Thank you, Ellie Jones, down in Christchurch, and up here in Auckland, Mark Knopf, Thomas. It's been great to have you company today. Myra has never been fishing. Cindy says she knew someone who's never been to Auckland. Jason has never watched a full game of rugby. Who are these people? That's the panel for this week. Jim Mora is back on Monday with you, and John Campbell is up next with Checkpoint. Have a great weekend.
Tōku mara e hoa mahi kōrero, kei te haere hei kaupapa, kei te karawhio. Tonight on Checkpoint, we look back on a remarkable life. Aretha Franklin, a superstar, but so much more than that. A family friend of Martin Luther King, she sang at Barack Obama's inauguration and provided a soundtrack to the sweeping changes in American life in between. We hear from her biographer, the pastor at what was her father's church, and a few of the people she inspired. Also tonight, celebrations are underway at the Turanga Waiwai Marae. The King's Band reporters, but we sent John Boynton anyway. The education sector is facing another strike, this time by specialists who work with special needs children. And thunder, lightning and torrential rain in some parts of the North Island. A very special Checkpoint tonight. We'll be with you after the news.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, I'm Anna Thomas. A company has been fined more than $500,000 for misleading customers about steel mesh products used for earthquake strengthening. The Commerce Commission brought 20 charges against Brilliant Steel, including 11 of misleading the public. Ben Strang reports.
Brilliance was one of 5 companies investigated following a complaint in August 2015. In the Auckland District Court today, it was fined $540,000, having earlier admitted all of the charges. Judge Robert Renane says the company was highly culpable because consumers cannot be certain whether all of the mesh complied with standards. 9 of the charges related to false or misleading claims that the products had been tested by an independent laboratory. Another company caught up in the same investigation, Steel and Tube, has admitted to 24 charges but is yet to be sentenced. Call Ben Strang 10A.
The government is proposing a new infrastructure agency in order to improve planning and investment. The Infrastructure Minister, Shane Jones, says Treasury is unable to properly quantify the size of the country's infrastructure deficit. Here's our political reporter, Joe Moore.
Mr Jones says that when the coalition government took office, it quickly became clear there was no plan for tackling the problems facing the sector. He says Treasury doesn't hold accurate or up-to-date information about all projects across all sectors, and agencies themselves may not necessarily know the extent of their future capital needs. Mr Jones says he will report back to Cabinet early next year with options for the new agency, which he hopes will be operational by late next year. From Parliament, Joe Moyer.
The director of the Deer Velvet Company, Silberhorn, broke down while taking the stand in the Dunedin District Court this afternoon. A disputed facts hearing is being held regarding 27 charges against Silberhorn, now known as Gateway Solutions, and 1 against its sole director, Ian Carline. Most of the charges relate to false labelling. Guilty pleas have been entered for all charges, but Mr Carline says his admission of guilt was given reluctantly. He told the court he's had difficulties throughout life, including health problems.
This is probably a reflection of my challenges through life. Bear in mind, I've been through a lot in the last few years. If we could just have a minute.
Ian Carline says if he was to attend school these days, he would be diagnosed as dyslexic. The Immigration Minister says he will review temporary work visas and Pacific immigration settings to make them fit for purpose. Ian Lees-Galloway says immigration policy needs to go back to first principles about which skills gaps need filling. This report from Jill Bonnet.
Speaking today at a conference of the Association of Migration and Investment, Mr Lees-Galloway said it wasn't enough to tinker with a system that has had policies bolted onto it over the years. The previous government's decision to make temporary immigrants leave the country for a year after a maximum of 3 years will be part of the review. Mr Lees-Galloway says he wants to create a more streamlined system. He says all Pacific immigration settings and the recognised seasonal employer scheme will also be reviewed. In Auckland, Jill Bonnet.
Hundreds of people have been gathering at the church in the US city of Detroit, where Aretha Franklin's father was a preacher and she first sang as a young girl. The singer died early today, aged 76. The ABC's Bridget Brennan is outside the new Bethel Baptist Church.
People here have been streaming into this church to pay tribute to the Queen of Soul, leaving messages for her, flowers and balloons, writing that Aretha Franklin really changed their lives in many ways. This music that came from Aretha Franklin influenced so many people here and meant so much to them. And we've been speaking to people who met her as a young girl in the church here, where she began singing as a teenager.
She wasn't a judger, she was just an awesome singer. I shook my hips to a lot of Aretha.
And fans have also been paying tribute at New York City's Apollo Theatre and at Aretha Franklin's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The winner of the largest Lotto prize ever won in the South Island, $22.3 million, says he wants to buy a boat and a house with some land. The Central Otago man in his 20s, who has not been named, says he bought the winning ticket on a whim just before the draw on Wednesday night. He says he was scrolling through Facebook when he saw a post on the Powerball prize that night. The man says he didn't check his ticket until last night and was in absolute shock when Lotto confirmed the this morning that he was the winner. It's 5:05. Hockey New Zealand will meet with the Players' Union early next week to discuss concerns about the environment within the Black Sticks women's squad. One former player said she was mistreated and as a consequence decided to end her international career. Hockey New Zealand have confirmed they're reviewing processes relating to player welfare. But the executive manager of the Hockey Players Association, Glenn Solsberger, says no specific complaint has been laid.
There are obviously some things that players have discussed with us which we need to address with Hockey New Zealand, but there hasn't been a complaint made as such by anyone, and we're going into the meeting with a really open mind just about sharing information and ideas and see where we get to.
Glenn Solsberger. Wallabies captain Michael Hooper says he's fired up for tomorrow night's Bledisloe Cup clash with the All Blacks in Sydney, but concedes he may not last the full 80 minutes. Hooper is returning from a hamstring injury suffered while playing against Ireland 8 weeks ago and says thanks to a meticulous rehabilitation program, he's ready to go.
I'm going to come out, guns blazing. So, look, we'll see how that goes tomorrow night. I mean, the best minutes to be on the field are the back end of the game. So, yes, I'd love to be there. However, whatever is best for the team, and if we can get a really good substitution there in myself or someone else, then that'll be made.
The Wallabies captain Michael Hooper. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nadia Reid is our Friday Night Live act. Our Something for the Weekend is World Humanitarian Day, which will go nicely with a Sonic Tonic dedicated to us. On Nights, Up with the People. Afternoon news at 7.
Where did New Zealand get its love for whitebait from? It's something that's been around for decades, generations ago. We're going to go whitebaiting. You know, when I was a child, I didn't even really know what I was eating until I had a really close look.
Yeah, same with me. It wasn't until much later on, until I started studying them even, that I realised that there were 5 different species in there and that they were juveniles of some pretty amazing fish that we've found nowhere else in the world. That kind of realisation changed everything for me.
That's Lately with Karen Hay, 10 p.m. weeknights on RNZ National.
Now looking at the Met Service short forecast. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, fine spells and a few showers, some heavy easing this evening. Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country. Occasional showers, some heavy, gradually clearing from the south tomorrow. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain, clearing this evening, then fine spells. A few showers spreading north tomorrow afternoon. For Wellington and Wairarapa, partly cloudy, showers spreading north tonight, possibly heavy, clearing tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, a few showers, mainly about the ranges. Buller and Western, showers clearing tonight, fine tomorrow. For Canterbury, areas of rain with snow to 500 metres, clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. Otago and Southland, a few showers with snow to 700 metres in Otago, clearing tonight, fine and frosty tomorrow. Great for whitebaiting. And for Fiordland, fine weather. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional rain. You know, John, you don't actually have to fill it a whitebait.
I'm ashamed to say I'm very partial to whitebait, although I'm rethinking that position. But gosh, they're delicious. I apologise to people who love them as a species. We begin tonight with Aretha Franklin, who's died at home in Detroit, aged 76. America has no royalty, Barack and Michelle Obama said in a joint statement following the announcement of her death. But we do have a chance to earn something more enduring. And she did. An extraordinary voice shaped in her father's church, first heard more widely on a gospel recording Songs of Faith released when she was just 14. But it was when she signed to Atlantic Records in 1967 that she exploded onto the charts. Respect, Natural Woman, Chain of Fools, Think, Say a Little Prayer, hit after hit. A massive crossover star, utterly grounded by her Detroit upbringing, embraced by radio stations who'd previously been terrified of anyone blacker than Elvis. She won 14 Grammys, she sold 75 million records, but the awards and the sales figures only explain part of why this was such an extraordinary life. To understand the significance of Aretha Franklin in American life, consider that Think, with its cry of and for freedom, was released in 1968, 1 month after the assassination of Martin Luther King, and it made the Billboard Top 10. At a time of murderous enmity, she stood upright and magnificent, audacious with her sense of possibility.
Mama, I love the way you put that, the sense of possibility And that's what she stands for right now, that all things are possible. You know, Aretha could have stopped on the sideline a long time ago. She suffered disappointing marriages and whatnot. She could have given up, but she didn't. She pressed on and on and on, and got her respect.
What you want? Baby, I got it. What you need? You know I got it. All I'm asking you is for when you get home.
That was Reverend Robert Smith Jr. from the New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit, the Franklin family's church, where Aretha sang in the choir and where this morning people gathered to pay tribute.
People are bringing balloons, they're bringing flowers, they're bringing stuffed animals. People riding down the street blasting the songs, many times interrupting interviews. But all that's all right and good. People are just trying to express themselves in the only way they know how. And, of course, the media's there hoping to get Jesse Jackson or Stevie Wonder or some other celebrity friends. Mr. Jackson has already been by. We expect Stevie Wonder to come by. Who knows? Diana Ross might even come by.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that a tribute to her that they're turning up? And isn't it a tribute to the very central role your church played in her life? It was her father's church, right?
For 38 years. For 38 years, she sang in that church under the direction of her father.
This is her on the piano in 1964. The rest of the band are white men in suits. She hasn't found her songbook yet, but her talent. Listen.
Baby, here I am by the railroad tracks, waiting for my baby. It's coming on back.
But it was when she signed to Atlantic that people began to really notice her. And when I asked Pastor Robert what song he had picked for us to listen to, he went to near the beginning of those glorious years at Atlantic Records.
Well, I love when she sings Ain't No Way, when she sits down to the piano and plays herself. And she's singing the song, Ain't No Way for Me to Love You If You Won't Let Me. And she's singing from the depths of her heart. I don't know who she's thinking about, who she's really talking to, but, I mean, it goes to your soul.
Ain't no way for me to love you if you won't let me.
Now, none of this seems revolutionary in 2018, but at the time, her talent, her brilliance was so singular that she couldn't be ignored by program directors on white radio stations, by the record-buying public, by primetime TV. Respect went to #1. She appeared on the cover of Time magazine, and she released an album called Young, Gifted and Black. Almost 5 decades on, that still matters. This morning, our producer Bridget Burke phoned the Soulsville Foundation in Memphis, Aretha Franklin's birthplace. And she spoke to 18-year-old Jonathan Lee, a graduate student. She asked Jonathan to pick an Aretha song for us to listen to, and guess what?
My favorite is Ain't No Way. It goes, ain't no way for me to love you if you won't let me. Oh, yeah.
Looking out on the morning rain, I used to feel so uninspired.
Prince, David Bowie, George Michael, Leonard Cohen, Tom Petty. We've been losing musicians with a terrible profligacy of late. But what makes Aretha Franklin slightly different from even those greats is the broader aspirations she represented, the bigger hope. Before she was 30, Emmett Till had been lynched, Rosa Parks had been arrested for not standing for a white passenger on a bus, and Medgar Evers, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King had been assassinated. And then in 2009 she sang at the inauguration of a black president. Hers was not only a brilliant musical life, it was, sometimes against immense odds, a triumphantly black American one.
She knew all these figures like Martin Luther King and the great blues singers like Dinah Washington and even Billie Holiday would be friends of her father's.
That's Mark Bego, who wrote a biography of Aretha Franklin. We'll have more from him later in the program. But let's head home for a moment and back decades to where a schoolboy in Wellington who would go on to become one of our great soul and R&B vocalists was starting to fall in love with music.
In those days, R&B didn't figure a lot on our airwaves, but the 2ZB Sunday request session, somebody would request James Brown every week, and that was where I first heard Respect.
For Rick Bryant, who we'll hear more from later, it was a lightning bolt moment. Bigger.
I think the word epiphany means first sight of God, and that's what she was one of. Her whole career was an epiphany.
And what song would Rick Bryant pick for us to listen to at the end of Aretha Franklin's life? Well, I was asking him that, and he knew. If there is one Aretha Franklin song that you were going to say to our audience, listen to this, because
well, there's one called Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time? Didn't I blow your mind this time? Didn't I? I think it's on Young, Gifted and Black, but I'm not sure.
Yes, it was. Yes, she did. And the minds she blew first, well, they were probably in the congregation at the New Bethel in Detroit. And there today, watching the TV networks camped outside and the flowers being left and the people singing the songs she made famous, Pastor Robert was reflecting on her life and on the gift she had, which she shared.
Well, she had the most blessed voice that one can imagine. Only God could have given her that very, very special voice. And it was a soul-penetrating voice, a voice that could not be ignored.
Just wanna be close to you. You make me feel so alive. You make me feel. You make me feel. You make me feel like a natural woman.
Aretha Franklin, 76 years old. What an extraordinary life. And after 6 o'clock tonight on Checkpoint, we will look back on it in great depth. We will speak to her biographer, hear from some of the people she inspired, and also talk to New Zealanders in the street about what Aretha song they loved, you loved best. That's after 6 o'clock. It's 5:18. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Many of you in the North Island may have heard or seen the thunderstorms this morning, thunderbolts and lightning. Not that frightening, unless you're in certain parts of the island. It struck close to home for some. More than 8,000 lightning strikes were recorded overnight and into this morning. And as Tom Fairley reports, for the residents in the Waikato town of Tokoroa, it was a real-time wake-up call.
I've never heard anything as loud. It was a sonic boom. The pressure from that sonic boom had shattered windows across the street from me. It shattered my bedroom window. It shattered my friend's window about 4 houses up, just from the explosion itself.
That's Sharon Newman. After being woken by the bang and checking on her grandchildren, she went outside to find the explosion had come from a large cedar tree 15 metres down the street.
The tree was completely obliterated, and when I say there was debris all around the street, I'm not talking branches and things. I'm talking tree trunk. I'm talking like a metre long, and it was it was massive.
The house closest to the tree lost around a dozen windows, and the splintered tree damaged a wall and flattened a parked ute. Further down Cody Street, Neil Hood rushed to the window to find his car had narrowly escaped damage from a large hunk of tree trunk thrown 100 metres.
Yeah, I can't get out of my driveway at the moment. All the tree debris and that is right across my driveway, so I'm trapped here until they move it all.
And it wasn't just those in the drenched vicinity. Vinnie Martin lives several kilometres across town.
It was just a huge lightning flash, like bigger than the usual, and then a thunderclap that was basically right on top of the flash, and it was so loud and it just shook the whole house. And we've got pussycats, and they ran in all directions, and it was just chaos for about 30 seconds.
The man in charge of fire and emergency efforts, Dave Morris, says it was like someone had put dynamite in the tree.
All the little covers for the those little grey telephone boxes have all blown off for approximately 100 yards. Talking to other residents up the side street, all power points and phone jacks have been blown off the walls.
His crews extinguished the fire on the tree, but the explosion also burst a nearby gas pipe, which had to be isolated and fire put out. Meanwhile, electricians, window glazers and contractors have been kept busy repairing people's homes and clearing up the debris. As Neil Hood says, it was an exciting end to the week.
The whole neighbourhood were out in their pyjamas, and you don't need an alarm in Tuckera, you get exploding trees.
The weather also caused traffic chaos in Auckland this morning when an electricity transformer caught fire in Manukau after being struck by lightning, cutting power to traffic lights in some homes. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
Celebrations are underway at Turanga Waiwai to mark the 12th anniversary of the Maori King's coronation, or coronation. Controversy surrounds this weekend's events after King Tuhetia's former advisor, Tukuruorangi Morgan, wrote a scathing letter this week criticising the $250,000 salary paid to the King's chief advisor, Rangi Whakaruru, as well as alleged misspending to fund an expensive car and a tummy tuck. Te Mana Korehi reporter John Boynton is in Ngāroa Wahia, although not as an invited guest, and I asked him what would be happening this weekend.
Kia ora, John. Well, thousands of people are expected to descend upon Turanga Waiwai Marae this weekend. Today is a day of remembrance. It's Te Rao Te Kauemate, where loved ones bring photos of those who have passed away. And this is a long-held tradition of the kingitanga. This year is the 12th koronehana for Kingi Tuheitia, and it's a chance for those from around the country, around different iwi, to come together to celebrate the Maori King's coronation and also the kingitanga movement.
John, the big events are over the weekend, of course. There's a real sense, though, that this occasion has well and truly been rained on, literally and figuratively, if the weather up here is the same as the weather there. Who is there today?
Well, we can't actually tell who's inside the marae grounds right now at Turanga Waiwai because there has been a ban put in place for all media over the 5 days of the Koronehana celebrations. And this comes in the light of furor over alleged misspending by the Office of the Maori King, which is known as Te Ururangi Trust. Tukuruorangi Morgan, who is a former advisor to the Maori King, wrote a scathing letter which was released to media this week, criticising the Maori King and namely his chief advisor, Rangi Whakaruru, over alleged misspending in the office. And he highlights some of the extravagant spending, which included purchases of expensive cars, loans and a tummy tuck. He also criticised the $250,000 salary of Mr Whakaruru when there are so many people in Ngāroa Wahia who live in poverty. So all of that is surrounding this weekend's events.
John, one guest whose name I don't suspect will be on the guest list, but who may turn up anyway, is Tukuruorangi Morgan. Do you think that he will be sighted at Ngāroa Wahia over the weekend?
Well, when we spoke to Mr Morgan earlier this week, he was overseas, but this is his kāinga, this is his home, so it's very likely he will make an appearance this weekend during the Koronehana. Now, what reception he receives from the Maori King will be interesting to see. Last month, Mr Morgan came out in support of a serious fraud office investigation into alleged misspending by the Ururangi Trust. He wanted to get to the bottom of what was happening within the trust, and this did not earn him any favours with the Maori King, who went to criticise Mr Morgan during the Iwi Chairs Forum, which was held in Naruawahia just a couple of weeks ago, and this led to Mr Morgan penning that scathing letter which has made the rounds in media this week.
John, I know this is the eve of this event and we'll know much better when it's all over, but where do you think all of this, the controversy, the Serious Fraud Office investigation, Tuku Morgan's letter, where does this leave the Kingitanga movement, do you think?
So the Kingitanga has been a strong political movement in Te Ao Māori since it was established in 1858. So I'm not sure if this event will break it, but of course it brings unwanted controversy to this weekend's Coronation celebrations. I was here in Naruawahia earlier this week talking to locals. A lot of them didn't want to go on tape to criticise the Kingitanga because they believe so much in its values and what it's represented over more than 100 years. And yeah, they really want to get to the bottom of alleged misspending, and one person told me that the Maori King needs to weed out the weeds within his office so the Kingitanga can move forward from this.
John Boynton, well, Rangi McLean is a former Māori Party candidate and current chairman of the Manurewa Marae. He told our John he supported the media ban.
I actually agree with it. I agree with it in the extent that it's come from the treasure of the motu, and it's come from the Kingitanga in its 160 odd years of being a taonga of the motu. So I have to say I agree with it. I agree with the ban. Yeah.
And what's your opinion on Tuku's letter and it being released before the Coronation?
Well, Tuku is Tuku, and he will do what Tuku wants to do. But for me, I'm here to show my support for the Kingitanga as a member of Tūhoe, and all the work that I do in Tāmaki Mākaurau is with the knowledge that I hold the Kingitanga dear to my heart. Yeah.
And I guess just about the alleged misspending, what do you think? What's your thoughts on those allegations?
Well, when I hear how much corporate fraud is going on, then that tempers my view. I've got nothing to say about how those allegations, because right now they're still there. Although the investigation is going on, there's still allegations. So until everything comes out in the wash, then I have nothing to say on it.
And I guess what kind of reception do you think Tuku might get if he does come this weekend?
I have no hesitation in standing by Tuku to be supportive because one, he's from Tainui. Two, he was a kai kōrero for our king, and three, he was our president of the Maori Party.
That's Rangi McLean speaking to our excellent reporter John Boynton. Dan Cook, the cameraman at Naruawahia for us. Let's go to Italy now, where the government has officially launched an investigation into the toll road operator Autostrada following the motorway bridge collapse in the northern city of Genoa. The death toll now stands at 38, but authorities say, based on reports of missing people, another 20 people could still be buried in the rubble. And below the parts of the viaduct which are still somehow standing, 600 people have been evacuated due to safety concerns. With more, here's the BBC's James Reynolds.
In Genoa, a single terrifying moment is now frozen. More than 2 days on, vehicles are stuck in the exact positions in which they were abandoned when the rest of this bridge collapsed. Nearest the edge is the Basco Food Company truck. Its driver, Luigi, had the narrowest of escapes. The San Pier d'Arena neighbourhood is right underneath the structure. Relief workers have cleared the area. The homes may be knocked down. This morning, locals queued up to collect some of their possessions. These residents are prepared to wait patiently, but they also want answers. Many say that they always believed that the bridge was unsafe.
It's been years that we've been saying that this bridge was dangerous. We talked about it almost every day.
Grazia Di Benedetto and her husband Carlo were desperate to get back home.
They're not letting us in. I need to pick up my medicines. This is awful.
It's too early to say what caused the collapse. Among the factors that investigators will consider are the quality of the concrete in the towers and supports, and whether this had weakened. The diagonal cables that carried the road, known as stays. These were encased in concrete, making it hard for accurate checks to be carried out. And the metal connections that anchored the stays to the platform. The private company which operated the bridge, Autostrade, has insisted that it followed all safety procedures. But this doesn't satisfy Italy's government.
We must ensure that everything is done according to standards, and I declare that in this story, Autostrade per l'Italia cannot reassure us of anything.
At the scene of the collapse, rescuers continue to search for bodies. Amid all the arguments, Italy doesn't yet know exactly how many deaths it will be investigating.
You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up on the program, specialists who work with special needs children will strike next Tuesday. Katy Perry fans who bought tickets a year ago, whatever outrageous price they were at the time, cry foul as promoters slash ticket prices in half. We have a really special tribute to Aretha Franklin after 6. We've got some sport, including rugby before 6. Madison's next with business news, but before it all, Anna with the headlines.
Thanks, John. A company has been fined more than $500,000 for misleading customers about steel mesh products used for earthquake strengthening. The Commerce Commission brought 20 charges against Brilliant Steel, including 9 relating to claims the products had been tested by an independent laboratory. In the Auckland District Court today, Judge Robert Rowan said the company was highly culpable because people cannot be sure the mesh is up to standard. Another company caught up in the investigation, Steel and Tube, has admitted to 24 charges but has yet to be sentenced. The Immigration Minister says immigration policy needs to go back to basics and look at which skills the country needs. Ian Lees-Galloway says he wants to create a more streamlined system. Temporary work visas and Pacific immigration, including the recognised seasonal employer scheme, will be reviewed to make them fit for purpose. The government is proposing a new infrastructure agency to improve planning and investment. The Infrastructure Minister, Shane Jones, says Treasury doesn't have enough information to properly work out the size of the country's infrastructure deficit. He says he hopes the new body will be up and running by late next year. The director of the Deer Velvet Company, Silberhorn, broke down while taking the stand in the Dunedin District Court this afternoon. A disputed facts hearing is being held regarding 27 charges against the company, now known as Gateway Solutions, and 1 against its sole director, Ian Carline. Most of the charges relate to false labelling. Mr Carline told the court he pleaded guilty reluctantly and he's had difficulties all his life, including health problems. And a Central Otago man who won the South Island's largest ever Lotto prize of $22.3 million says he bought the winning ticket on a whim on Wednesday night. The man, who's in his 20s, says he wants to buy a boat and a house with some land. Wonderful. Those are the headlines.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna. See you at 6. Let's turn to business news now with Madison Reedy. Hi, Madison.
Hello.
Westpac replacing thousands of credit cards after a security breach. Who was hacked, and are other banks doing the same?
This was following a hack of Ticketmaster, the online ticketing website, which may have actually been selling those Katy Perry tickets we were just talking about. And that hack actually happened in the United Kingdom in June. And Ticketmaster came out a few months later and said, look, this may have impacted about 5% of our international sites too. So they have their own site in New Zealand. And that compromised payment information. And obviously we didn't know if that had actually impacted anyone here until there were a few reports around about one Westpac customer who had $14,000 stolen out of her account on 2 occasions after she made a Ticketmaster purchase. And Westpac obviously followed that and said, you know, this means we're at a low risk of fraud here, and as a precautionary measure, they're now replacing 30,000 credit and debit cards, but only of those who are at risk, who have obviously made Ticketmaster transactions. Now, I went to the other banks as well and asked, were they doing the same thing? Have they noticed any fraudulent activity because of this hack as well? And ANZ said they'd replaced some, but they wouldn't tell me how many, like Westpac did, or how much they've refunded to those customers that have had money stolen from them, because they were worried that, well, it's actually part of their security policy, but they're worried that by coming out and saying how successful the hacker was could, put a bit of wind in their sail. ASB hasn't replaced any cards. They've just increased their fraud monitoring, and BNZ hasn't done anything. They're confident in their fraud monitoring measures.
Thanks, Madison. Busy week next week. What's on the agenda?
Very busy week. If there is any week to pay attention to business news, next week is it. We have 15 companies reporting their annual results for the financial year to June just ended, and these companies are some of the largest ones, are ones that KiwiSaver funds are invested in. We're talking big money and our biggest companies here, so certainly keep watch. The ones to keep an eye on, and that we'll be certainly keeping our eyes on, are Spark. So that comes out early in the week. They have already flagged that they might have some profit losses because of a restructure. They announced they're changing to an agile working environment. No idea what that means. We have also Fletcher Building as well. So, we'll obviously be asking the question, is this rock bottom? Is it all up from here? How, has it got the worst that it can get? And their outlook will have a lot to say as well. We've got Air New Zealand, Auckland Airport. Air New Zealand's actually on track for a second record profit under the reign of the Chief Executive, Christopher Luxon. And we've got Sky TV as well. So we'll be talking about broadcasting rights, I'm sure.
All of them fascinating. Thanks, Madison. What happened on the markets today?
The NZX Top 50 index rose over 0.5%. It was up almost 54 points to close over 9,000 tonight at 9,052. The New Zealand dollar's buying at 65.9 US cents, not quite over that 66 cent mark yet. 90.7 Australian and 51.8 British cents.
Madison Reedy, fantastic work this week. Thank you. Have a great weekend. The education sector is facing another strike, this time by specialists who work with special needs children. On Wednesday, 29,000 teachers and principals walked out of the classroom for the first time in 24 years. Now their learning support colleagues will do the same due to low pay, high caseloads and under-resourcing. Emma Hatton has more.
About 1,000 learning support specialists are employed by the Ministry of Education to undertake fieldwork, which involves visiting primary, secondary and preschool children, assessing them and putting a plan in place to suit their learning needs. They include speech therapists and occupational therapists, whose salary starts at around $48,000, and psychologists who, at the very top end of the scale, are on $88,000. 574 of these specialists are members of the union and will strike on Tuesday. New Zealand Educational Institute lead negotiator Byron Sanders says its members were angry with the ministry's pay offer of a 2% rise now and a further 2% in March next year.
Quite frankly, we don't see that as good enough. We don't see that 2% will go anywhere near far enough to ensuring that we can recruit and retain those key professionals into those roles.
The union wants the ministry to organise an independent audit to assess exactly how much these workers are worth and where the pressure points are. Mr Sanders says it's clear that caseloads are too high and this has to be addressed.
It's not good enough that in the Wellington region we've had principals wait over 6 months for a psychologist for a child that's been violent, when that child is not only having their own learning impacted negatively, but they're having the learning of all the children that are around them impacted negatively as well.
Psychologist Michael Fox says he has a caseload of more than 40 children. 15 would be ideal, but he could do 30 at a push.
The schools call and need you there, but it's just like you're feeling stretched because you just don't have the time to come in to do that. And sometimes, you've got to rearrange your schedule because you've got to handle the high priority cases with severe behaviour kind of stuff.
He says he's considered resigning due to the pressure.
You do get that because you're getting overloaded, but then, our first concern is the kids, and we know that if I go, then that caseload's going to go on to somebody else.
Deputy Principal of Wainuiomata Primary School and a Special Education Needs Coordinator, Tute Pora Samuels, says specialists are critical for the children at her school.
Over the last 5 years in particular, we have really, really high needs kids come into our school, and in the past we've been able to call on them, they've come, they've helped us through a crisis response, helped us through putting in a plan to support these kids in the short term and the long term, and now we just can't get them.
She says about 45 children from a roll of 300 have learning needs, but not all of them are getting the support required.
At the end of the day, it is children with trauma, children with high complex needs, children with high autism. These kids need these specialists. They absolutely need them, and their parents are in my office saying, why isn't my child getting the support? I would love to get them that support, but we just can't.
The ministry says it has allocated money to recruit 100 more staff and is working to fill vacancies in areas where there is high demand. It also says come Tuesday they have plans in place to deal with any urgent assessments or traumatic incidents at schools. For Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
It's coming up to 20 to 6. It's the case of the celebrity-endorsed Dear Velvet, the chocolate substitute and the conspiracy. The Dunedin District Court has this week been the venue for a disputed facts hearing between the Commerce Commission, the plaintiff, and Silberhorn Limited and its director Ian Carline, the defendants. 28 charges have been admitted, yet the court has to rule on the interpretation of an agreed summary of facts. Our Otago Southern reporter Timothy Brown has followed the twists and turns of the week.
Sir Bob Charles, New Zealand's greatest golfer and still going strong.
I'm sure that Sportsville was a contributing factor to my success and I'll continue to use it.
We all remember the ads. The touted benefits of Dear Velvet backed by our golfing great was public knowledge. But what wasn't public until earlier this week is that Silberhorn, now known as Gateway Solutions Limited, was embroiled in a 3-year court case with the Commerce Commission. The company has admitted 26 charges relating to diluting Dear Velvet with carob, a cocoa substitute, and Silberhorn and its director, Ian Carline, have each admitted 1 count of withholding information from the Commission. It emerged in court this week that the man who sparked the investigation was Colin Lee, the head of a company contracted to carry out work for Silberhorn. And that's when the evidence got interesting.
He had also, during the course of the time that you've been dealing with him, written letters of complaint about you.
Yes, they were largely about the investigation.
Some of the material that he had included rumours that he had received had reference to Maori, is that so?
He did make that comment to the Commission having Ngāpuhi insiders or something rather conspiring with the complainant, yes.
That's an exchange between Mr Carline's lawyer, Judith Ablett-Kerr QC, and Commission investigator Wedemu Lowry regarding Mr Carline. When asked what he thought of the allegations, this was Mr Lowry's response.
It was almost laughable, to be honest. It was so absurd that you couldn't take offence to it.
So you didn't take offence, you thought that was...
I found it was offensive, but I just brushed it off. I have a job to do.
Technological faults marred the early stages of the week, and extended cross-examination of Mr Lowry yesterday and today caused frustration for the Commerce Commission's legal team, such as this exchange between lawyer M Brookie and Judge Kevin Phillips.
Sorry to interrupt, Your Honour. Good morning. I have a full tank of petrol this morning, but I'm no less able to see the relevance of this line of questioning in relation to the disputed facts that are before Your Honour. I just wanted to note that.
Thank you, that's noted. I'm noting it.
I'm glad
you understand what we are here for, Mr Ablett-Kerr. I know, and you are staying on point.
I am, sir.
The hearing is not to determine guilt. That has already been conceded. Silberhorn's Dear Velvet capsules contained less velvet than was stated on the label between March 2011 and August 2015, more than 10% less in some cases. But what is in dispute is whether it was done intentionally to mislead the public or if it was an oversight. Ms Ablett-Kerr insists it's the latter. Late today, Mr Carline took the stand.
I reluctantly pleaded guilty, as I believe that the label is disputed.
The court heard Mr Carline has learning difficulties and these days would be described as dyslexic. The case was set down for 5 days, though some said it would take 3. But in any event, it's now unlikely to wrap up before Wednesday next week. In the Dunedin District Court for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
It's almost 16 minutes to 6. The death of American soul singer Aretha Franklin from pancreatic cancer has put the spotlight on the treatment options available to New Zealanders. More than 2,000 people have pancreatic cancer in New Zealand and 1 person is diagnosed every day. As Dan Dalgetty discovered, New Zealanders who have the disease are having to pay up to $60,000 to travel to Australia for a specialised treatment because it isn't available here.
There are two forms of pancreatic cancer, the uncommon pancreatic neuroendocrine or the more common type, pancreatic adenocarcinoma. Aucklander Elaine Milo was diagnosed with pancreatic neuroendocrine cancer last year after worrying symptoms.
I went into ED and I was pretty much diagnosed with cancer. They definitely found tumours on my liver. My cancer's too far gone, so there's no cure. I've been told there's no cure, but we can prolong this cancer, and that's with PRRT.
Peptide receptor radionuclide therapy, PRRT for short, is a molecular therapy used to relieve symptoms and slow the progression of the disease. But because it's not yet available in New Zealand, people such as Elaine Milo are having to travel to Australia to prolong their life expectancy. Wellingtonian Chris Holmes, who also has the disease, has also headed over the ditch for treatment.
I mean, I got to the point where basically my doctors had said that, I'd run out of options here. I spoke to a friend of mine, and he alerted me to this treatment in Melbourne, which is only available in about 5 or 6 places globally, I think.
Chris Holmes says the Ministry of Health has to find a better way for New Zealanders to access the treatment.
I think we need, obviously, the facilities and the specialists, but that's tricky. In the first case, it would be providing some mechanism for helping people get to Melbourne for the treatment. It's certainly providing me with longer life expectancy.
Elaine Milo says it shouldn't be so difficult for people to get the treatment they need.
I was offered capecitabine and temozolomide. It's an oral chemo. So with that, you take 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. That would be 1 round. So I did 2 rounds. And we had a quick look at the tumours, and there was no improvement, no shrinking. So, PRT was the next step.
Cancer charity, the Unicorn Foundation New Zealand's chief executive, Siobhan Conroy, says the organisation is doing everything possible to make PRRT available here.
We need to see the health system ensure that it is established here. We have been working with Pharmac for the funding, which is looking promising, but we're not quite there. It would, absolutely change these patients' lives if they could receive treatment in New Zealand.
The Cancer Treatment Subcommittee last year recommended funding for PRRT, but Pharmac Chief Executive Sarah Fitt says that's just the first step. She says there are significant implementation issues which the agency plans to discuss with district health boards and the Ministry of Health. For Checkpoint, Dan Dalgety.
Katy Perry tickets have been hot and then cold as promoters slash prices for his second show to try to fill Auckland's Spark Arena. Now, her 2010 and 14 shows sold out, but this time the second one is proving a hard sell. Tickets have been going for half price via the bargain website Grab One, and that's left fans who paid full price, which is quite a lot, feeling a bit miffed. Here's Rowan Quinn.
It's Katy Perry's tickets that have been up and then down, falling to as low as $69 this week, half the original lowest ticket price. Dunedin woman Julie Moyles' 6- and 8-year-old girls are huge Katy Perry fans, and she decided to take them to Auckland to see her as a very special treat. She says she was gutted when she heard about the cut prices.
You also have to fly up there, accommodation, rental car. The cost for me to go is humongous. So to think the tickets are half price really, really annoys me because it would have saved me so much money.
Wellington man Brad Warrington, who's an RNZ soundie, is taking his daughter for her very first concert. He says while the slashed tickets may be exciting for those who live close to Auckland, the rest of the country can't take the risk.
In hindsight, you could be like, I should have held off. But then, if you hold off for the tickets outside of town, you've got to make up the extra cost of airfares and accommodation. So, I guess in the end it's probably cheaper the way we did it, booking, nearly a year ago.
Auckland man Anthony Metcalf found himself on the other side of the ticketing situation earlier this month for a different concert. When rap superstar Kendrick Lamar announced his tour, Anthony balked at paying $160 a ticket, thinking, I'll see him another time. But a couple of days before the show, he checked the Ticketek resale website.
They've got, tickets for sale from people that can't make it and stuff like that. And usually if the show's sold out, they're at an exorbitant price, but I managed to get them 4 tickets for me and some friends for half price. It was $80 instead of $160, which seemed amazing.
RNZ's been unable to reach Perry's promoters, TEG Dainty, for comment. But another New Zealand promoter, Manolo Ishavi, who's not involved in the Katy Perry gig, says it's unusual for promoters to slash prices, and it's normally a last-ditch effort to claw back some funds, but it can backfire and upset those who got in early.
It just reflects badly on the industry as a whole in people's minds, because they don't understand the nitty-gritty of it all. All they see is that I've paid $200 and that bugger's paying $100. It's just not fair.
He says it's part of a promoter's job to weigh up how many people will attend and book the right number of shows. Once they've booked the artists, they're contractually obliged to pay them regardless of how many attend.
Every now and again, you do get it wrong. And what happens in this situation is the promoter is left with the inevitable situation where the show is going to lose a lot of money. And he has to make a decision on how to get as much money into the pot to try and cover the costs.
The Dunedin mum, Julie Moyle, says she understands the promoter's situation, but they've gone about things the wrong way.
How they could have handled it better is maybe offered something or something different to people who had already bought tickets, and I think that's where they've really let down the true followers, the people that really wanted to be there on Monday and Tuesday night.
And Brad Warrington's trying to be philosophical.
I'm not going to get too distraught about a couple of $100 when, you know, my daughter Asher in 10 years' time is going to be able to look back and go, oh, that was my first ever gig, and, you know, you can't really put a price on that.
I tāmaki makaurau mō Checkpoint, ko Rowan Quinn DNA.
9 minutes to 6. To sport now, and Hockey New Zealand will take a look at their own structures after a former player claimed she was unhappy with the environment within the Black Stick setup, and it forced her to end her international career. Mark Hager's been in charge of the women's side since 2008. In that time, they've twice finished fourth at the Olympics, and of course this year they won that wonderful gold at the Commonwealth Games. Joining us from our Wellington studio, sports reporter Barry Guy. Barry, you've been talking to a number of people about this. What can you tell us?
Yes, we spoke to Hockey New Zealand and also to the players' representatives, and what happened is that a complaint came to them third party via Sport New Zealand about the perceived environment within the Black Sticks women's squad. Since then, the Hockey Players Association, they've been in touch with some players, past and present, and some of them, I'm told, have voiced some concerns also. So therefore, they're due to meet next week. That was all a part of the review that was going to happen post the World Cup that they've just held recently. And these issues are then going to be raised also, and from there they'll decide what action that they'll take.
Boy, oh boy, there's been a bit of tension, hasn't there, in some New Zealand codes. I don't know if there's any tension in rugby at the moment, Barry. Things feeling, touch wood, fairly confident going into two big rugby tests. First of all, the All Blacks take on the Wallabies in the Bledisloe Cup opener, and the Black Ferns are playing the Wallaroos in the first of two tests. Let's start with the men. What do you make of the side that Steve Hansen has named?
Well, it's a predictable one, I suppose, John. The first major match for them this year, of course, they had the June internationals, and as Steve Hansen always says, this is the first time this year that they're playing Australia, and so he's expecting them to be at their best, just like they were at the end of last season. And so he has therefore put his best side out. Brodie Retallick, Kieran Reid returning to the side. I suppose the only interesting selection there was in the midfield, where Jack Goodhue comes in and partners Ryan Crotty in the midfield. Sonny Bill Williams isn't available, of course. But I suppose if you look at that, it's quite a good selection because those two have played together at the Crusaders all season. They won the title. And it's probably the best way to go because they know each other, combination. And I know there are a lot of raps on Jack Goodhue for the future, and this is a good opportunity for him. So, I mean, I don't know, John, you look at it also. I suppose, you couldn't have made too many changes from what he selected.
No, it's a good side. I'm hoping, I mean, it's a fantastic side, I think. I'm hoping the Wallabies are going to be really up for it. I went to possibly the last game we lost to Australia, which was in Sydney, and there's a vibe about this Wallabies team. I hope they're going to be competitive, Barry.
I went to the Dunedin test last year when the Wallabies sort of won. I remember, who was it? Kieran Reid, someone scored more or less on full time for the All Blacks to score, to win that match. The Wallabies sort of won it. You know, how they didn't win, I'm not too sure, and I'm expecting that similar effort from the Wallabies tomorrow night. They're paying some extraordinary money, if anyone's into betting, to put some money on the Wallabies, because you might get a good return. They're at home. You know, the All Blacks aren't always the best to start off with, and so I think it's going to be a lot closer than a lot of people expect, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Wallabies won this game.
Oh, it'll be exciting to see Australia really re-establish themselves as a rugby force. Let's talk about the women. The Black Ferns up against the Wallaroos. Yeah. Black Ferns are world champs, and by golly, they're looking good, aren't they?
That's right. Well, they actually haven't played since they won the title last year. Unfortunately for the women, they don't get the opportunities at this stage to play as often as they should, or they've got plenty from now on. And so I expect them to be a little bit rusty, but, you know, led by their captain, Afil Fa'amasili, who's got 50-something caps, and Kendra Coxedge, the half-back, and the full-back. They've all got plenty of experience there also. But there are 5 debutants in the side, and one of them, of course, is at first 5. That's Ruahei Demont. So it'd be interesting to see how she goes from... She's from Auckland, but there are big raps on her also. I just get the feeling that women's rugby, the Black Ferns, are a lot like the men in that they have the knowledge and the skill to win, and they know how to win, which doesn't come easy, but this side has that experience, and I just think perhaps they'll have too much for the Wallaroos tomorrow night.
Barry Guy, yeah. Boy, women's rugby is in fine health in New Zealand, isn't it? Both games over the weekend. Now to our Friday cat in a tree story, except this time it's a cat stuck near the diff of a police car. On Wednesday, the police received calls from the public about a cat on the northwestern motorway in Auckland who was causing chaos. Senior Constable Warwick Lice went out to try and rescue the little feline that had been hit and was missing a leg. But things didn't quite go as planned as the cat sought refuge inside his car. He spoke to our reporter Jesse Chang.
So I spent probably about an hour at the scene trying to reach under there and jacking the car up, and there was a couple of good Samaritans, a father and son, who turned up as well, and they were just phenomenal. They were very, very passionate about wanting to save this little thing, and so as I said, it was a good hour. We were underneath the car trying to get up there, but we just couldn't reach it. So then a decision was made by myself. We really had to drive the car somewhere else, somewhere safe, get it. Well, where it was a dangerous location anyway, and we'd ascertained that the cat wasn't going to go anywhere. So I drove back initially to the Harbour Bridge base at a slow speed, and one of my colleagues drove closely behind me just to keep an eye on what was going on and to inform me if obviously the cat did fall out or something, which is what we were hoping would not happen. But I spent about an hour and a half at base trying to get this thing out again, to no avail. So then we decided to take it down to Giltrap Holden, who do all our servicing of our vehicles. And I pulled in there and explained to the guys, and initially there was a bit of joviality and laughing, but they got it into the workshop straight away, put it up on a hoist, and this is where it got really amazing for me, because as soon as these guys saw the cat under there, and we all realised it was still alive, these guys just went into action, and it was really impressive just watching these guys. I think there was about 6 or 7 of them. They got the exhaust off first and all these other bits and pieces from the car, and probably the whole thing took about maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and they were able to reach up and pull the little thing out, and I was prepared to take it down to the vet, which they had told me about, but unbeknown to me, they'd already organised that, and there was a car waiting, and before I even knew it, the cat was gone.
And I understand you've been back to see the cat today?
No, I have tried. Ironically, I've spent several times yesterday trying there, and I was just on my way down to see it today when I came across the big crash on the bridge. So there seems to be something trying to stop me from getting to see this little thing, unfortunately, but my wife did say that she was very keen to have another little cat at home, even if it's got 3 legs. But I understand it may be going to someone else, so that's okay.
That was Senior Constable Warwick Lyles talking to our reporter Jesse Chang. Doesn't he sound like a good bugger? It's almost 1 minute to 6. Lots of feedback coming in on Tuku Morgan, pointing out the shopping he once did with his clothing allowance. And this from Bridget. Oh my God, John. OMG. Where is New Zealand getting all the money? We need all the world-class medical treatments that the richest countries have. Much better pay for nurses and teachers, particularly special needs teachers. Much better environmental standards by stopping industrial farmers. And presumably some kind of prevention of all the terrible things that are causing so many kids to arrive at school needing wraparound treatment. Oh yeah, and lots of new houses and improved welfare payments. But wait, doesn't RNZ keep harping on about business confidence? Cripes. Luckily, the left is putting the boot into the government at every turn, and soon we'll have a national government so they can spend no money on any of these things. But that's okay. Business confidence will go up. Nice one, news media. Stir the pot, says Bridget. Good on you, Bridget. Get it off your chest. Lots of people saying don't go to, well, not lots of people, actually just Wol, but you're a good bugger, Wol, saying don't go to Katy Perry, go and see Sticky Filth for $25. Well, why not?
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. A company has been fined more than $500,000 for misleading customers about steel mesh products used for earthquake strengthening. The Commerce Commission brought 20 charges against Brilliant Steel, 11 of misleading the public and 9 related to false or misleading claims that the products had been tested by an independent laboratory. In the Auckland District Court today, the company was fined $540,000, having earlier admitted all the charges. Judge Robert Renane said it was highly culpable because consumers now can't be certain whether all of the mesh complied with standards. The Infrastructure Minister says the government's proposed new infrastructure agency will streamline planning and investment. Shane Jones says when the coalition government took office last year, it quickly became clear there was no plan for fixing the problems facing the sector. He says he hopes the new agency will be up and running by late next year.
It's going to have a considerable amount of independence, but it also will be responsive to the government of the day, and it'll give a long-term pipeline vision, a level of visibility, so that the various stakeholders that have been calling for this institution can have a lot more certainty as to where we're going as a country in infrastructure.
Infrastructure Minister Shane Jones. A young woman has been charged in connection with the death of a toddler last month. 18-month-old Comfort Watiri Thompson died in Waikato Hospital on July the 24th after an incident at a Tiro address. Detective Senior Sergeant Matt Cranshaw says the 24-year-old woman is charged with injuring with intent to injure and with neglect of a child. When she appeared in the Rotorua District Court today, she was remanded in custody until her next court appearance on August the 27th. Police say further charges are likely as their investigation continues. A deputy principal says learning support specialists are critical, but high needs children are missing out because they're too busy. Psychologists and other professionals who work with such children have rejected the government's latest offer of a 2% pay rise now and another 2% next March, saying it's not enough to attract and retain staff. More than 500 of them will strike on Tuesday. Tute Porter Samuels from a Lower Hutt primary school says specialist caseloads are horrific.
Over the last 5 years in particular, we have really high needs kids come into our school, and in the past we've been able to call on them. They've come, they've helped us through a crisis response, helped us through putting in a plan to support these kids in the short term and the long term, and now we just can't get them.
A Deputy Principal, Tute Porter Samuels. The Vatican has expressed shame and sorrow over revelations that Catholic priests in the US state of Pennsylvania sexually abused about 1,000, mostly young people, over 7 decades. Earlier this week, the state released a grand jury report that found there had been a systematic cover-up of the abuse by 300 priests. A Vatican spokesperson, Greg Burke, says the report is being taken very seriously.
Victims should know that the Pope is on their side. Those who have suffered are his priority, and the Church wants to listen to them to root out this tragic horror that destroys the lives of the innocent.
Greg Burke also stressed the need for the Church to comply with civil laws. It's now emerged 9 planes in South America were targeted by hoax bomb threats, including one that had a stopover in Auckland. Most of the planes were operated by LATAM Airlines, while others were run by Sky, a low-cost Chilean airline. Several were forced to make an emergency landing or were prevented from taking off because of the threats. One of them, LATAM Flight 800, had stopped in Auckland on a flight from Sydney to Santiago. All of the planes have been declared free of explosives and the police are investigating. Fire and Emergency says lightning hit a tree in Tokoroa this morning like dynamite exploding. Residents were shaken awake by a loud bang shortly after 6:30, and Chief Fire Officer Dave Morris says crews arrived to see a startling sight.
The tree is absolutely blown to bits. It was almost like someone's put dynamite in it. Scattered over an area of about 50 metres, a rather large tree. It also ignited a gas line in the street, which was flaming away quite nicely.
Dave Morris says a nearby ute was totally flattened by the tree and windows down the street were smashed in the explosion. The fire was out by midday and contractors have been clearing debris and repairing homes. It's 6:05. Hockey New Zealand say they're always looking to provide the best possible environment for their players, and they're taking very seriously concerns that have been raised about the Black Sticks women's squad. One former player said she was so mistreated she decided to end her international career. The Black Sticks won the Commonwealth Games gold medal earlier this year, but failed to reach the quarterfinals of the recent World Cup. Hockey's Chief Executive, Ian Francis, says depending on the nature of concerns raised by a member of the public, they'll take action.
We have a meeting in place next week, which is part of our regular catch-up, as well as a debrief of the World Cup in London, and we'll listen to those concerns and then we'll act appropriately.
Ian Francis of Hockey New Zealand. The New Zealand Kiwis coach, Michael Maguire, says despite the rumours, he has no intention of becoming the Brisbane Broncos coach once Wayne Bennett departs. The former South Sydney coach has expressed his desire to lead an NRL team again, but told Macquarie's radio hosts he's most certainly not in negotiations with Brisbane.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where that one's come from, but obviously it's a great club, the Broncos, and they're working through a lot of things up there, and I've got full respect for the coaches that are there. So I don't want to add to anything, but no, there's been no contact.
Michael Maguire, the Broncos CEO, Paul White, has also confirmed Maguire has not been approached about the job. It's 6:06.
Tomorrow morning, former UKIP leader Mr Brexit, Nigel Farage. He's billed as the world's most charismatic politician. I didn't really have enough time to verify that. Meanwhile, in the United States, journalist David Nywood has been investigating the alt-right, a weird and disturbing bunch for whom Mr Farage's friend President Trump is a godsend. And I'll talk to Neil and Liam Finn about their first album together, and they will play a couple of tracks from it. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Fine spells and a few showers, some heavy, but they will all ease this evening. Waikato to Kapiti, including the central high country. Occasional showers, some heavy, gradually clearing from the south tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered rain clearing this evening, then fine spells. A few showers spreading north tomorrow afternoon. Wellington and Wairarapa, showers spreading north tonight, possibly heavy. They will clear tomorrow though. Nelson and Marlborough, a few showers, mainly about the ranges. Buller and Westland, showers clearing tonight, fine tomorrow. For Canterbury, areas of rain with snow to 500 metres, clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. Otago and Southland, a few showers with snow to 700 metres in Otago, clearing tonight, fine and frosty tomorrow. Fiordland, fine weather and occasional rain for the Chatham Islands. RNZ National, it's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
And Anna Thomas, it's been great having you with us for the past 3 nights. Thank you, Anna.
Pleasure, have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too. Nice to see you as always. Fans of America's Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, have been gathering at New York's landmark Apollo Theatre and on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to pay their respects, share their memories of her remarkable career and even in some cases break into song. The singing legend died at her home in Detroit early today, aged 76, of pancreatic cancer. Franklin was the most lauded female R&B vocalist of her era, winning 18 Grammy Awards and becoming the first woman to be admitted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. At the peak of her career, she had more than 24 top 40 hits. Tributes have been pouring in from fans, fellow musicians and world leaders. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we look back on her remarkable American life. Let's start with CNN's Jack Tapper, who looks back at, her life and her legacy.
She performed for popes and presidents and kings. Aretha Franklin, born into poverty in the Jim Crow South in 1942, defied the odds to become a legendary voice of empowerment for those too often silenced. Franklin provided the soul-stirring music that helped carry Martin Luther King Jr. and his family through the civil rights movement's worst moments.
I was behind Dr. King, and I was a very young girl.
Today, civil rights icon and longtime Congressman John Lewis expressed his gratitude.
We have lost one of the great spirits of our time. Aretha inspired all of us with her unbelievable capacity and ability to make us smile, to inspire us to dance, to be happy.
Her demand for respect in 1967 became a rallying cry for women worldwide. The hit was perhaps fittingly an adaptation of a man's lyrics. Franklin's revisions to Otis Redding's words, now iconic.
He didn't say that. I thought I should spell it out.
Franklin seemed fearless as she created unofficial anthems for all.
What do you do if you forget a lyric? I keep stepping.
Her career-defining swagger inspired fans to find their own confidence.
Hey!
When America's first black president took an oath to lead the nation, her voice again provided the soundtrack. Barack Obama was the third president to request her presence at his inaugural. The reaction to her house-shaking national anthem at the 1992 Democratic Convention perhaps summed it up best.
If that didn't make you patriotic, nothing will.
The Queen of Soul earned her crown by scoring 20 #1 hits on the Billboard R&B charts. But if you call Aretha Franklin a diva, take note of her definition.
My definition of a diva would be singers who give back to the community, who tithe to their churches, who are supportive in any way that they can be outside of theatrics.
If you feel you wanna kiss me, go right ahead.
This package from CNN. Checkpoint did its own tribute to Aretha Franklin. It was on an hour ago. It's available online now. Aretha Franklin's father was a pastor at Detroit's New Bethel Baptist Church for more than 3 decades. Reverend Robert Smith is the pastor there now. He says Aretha loved the church community and helped them throughout her life by donating to and holding fundraising concerts for those in need. Mourners have been gathering all day to pay their respects.
People are bringing balloons, they're bringing flowers, they're bringing stuffed animals. People riding down the street blasting the songs, many times interrupting interviews. But all that's all right and good. People are just trying to express themselves in the only way they know how. And, of course, the media's there hoping to get Jesse Jackson or Stevie Wonder or some other celebrity friends. Mr. Jackson has already been by. We expect Stevie Wonder to come by. Who knows? Diana Ross might even come by.
Isn't that a tribute to her that they're turning up? And isn't it a tribute to the very central role your church played in her life? It was her father's church, right?
For 38 years. For 38 years, she sang in that church under the direction of her father. And her father predicted that one day she would sing to queens and kings. He just didn't know that one day she'll be singing the presidents too, because you know that Clinton and Obama especially kept her in the White House, and even W. Bush gave her the Medal of Honor.
She sung at Martin Luther King's funeral, and if we look back at that time,
My God.
by golly, and she sung so beautifully. I've been watching it, and if we look back at that time, she was a proud, strong, brilliant African-American woman, and she was so important to the sense of possibility for African-Americans at a time of brutality and oppression.
Mama, I love the way you put that, the sense of possibility, and that's what she stands for right now, that all things are possible. You know, Aretha could have stopped on the sideline a long time ago. As she suffered disappointing marriages and whatnot, she could have given up, but she didn't. She pressed on and on and on, and got her respect.
She did. She did. What you want. Amazing, those first three words. If you were going to drive along your street blasting a tune out of the stereo in your car, what one would you pick? What's the Aretha song that's most special to you?
Well, I love when she sings Ain't No Way, when she sits down to the piano and plays herself. No other instruments involved, and she's just playing that piano, and she's singing the song Ain't No Way for me to love you if you won't let me. And she's singing from the depths of her heart. I don't know who she's thinking about, who she's really talking to, but, I mean, it goes to your soul.
Ain't no way, ain't no way, baby. Ain't no way, it ain't no way.
Reverend Robert Smith, who is the pastor at the New Bethel Church. Christy Valentine is the head of development at Soulsville Foundation, an academy for singers and musicians in Aretha Franklin's childhood neighbourhood in Memphis, Tennessee. She spoke with our producer Bridget Burke just after news of Aretha's death broke this morning.
Honestly, she was the pioneer. I mean, she earned the title Queen of Soul for a reason. She was, not only a woman, but a black woman in a time when women, and black women especially, were looked down upon or held to a different standard than other artists, and she powered through that. And I think that she used her voice as a means of expression and as a means of empowering a generation of women to do better and to strive for more and to seek the things that we deserve, like respect. And I just think that she is someone who we can absolutely still look to as a role model. We can look back on her life and see the accomplishments that she was able to achieve and mimic those and use those as guidance for moving forward.
What did you think when you heard that she died?
You know, we've been really sad all week. We knew that the end was near, and this is the end of an era. It's not just the death of a person, but it's the death of an institution. And so it's been a sad time for us all week, honestly, and for a long time, because we knew her health has been declining. So we've been anxiously dreading this moment, and now it's come to pass. So it is not nice, but it's good to see the outpouring of love and expression from across the world that she is receiving, and we hope and that she felt that while she was living, and that it's not just something that came to be after her death.
What song of Aretha's still gives you goosebumps?
Precious Lord. You know, her rendition of Precious Lord is incredible.
Ain't nothing, ain't nothing going right.
Christy Valentine, who is the head of development at Soulsville Foundation. Well, Jonathan Lee is a student there. He's 18 years old, and he talked to Bridget about Aretha's legacy.
Oh, Aretha Franklin means so much. She was a vital part of my life as a singer and as a vocalist, and especially being a communicator of soul, being able to minister not only through gospel but through all aspects of R&B music as well as, in person. So she was a person to look up to. She was, not only was she a woman that was able to hold her status as a performer and as a singer. She's been doing this since she was a little girl. And now to be in her late 70s and, have hold such a positive and powerful position in society, to lose a soul like that, it's heartbreaking, but also it's, she's lived a good life.
Talk to me about your singing, Jonathan. You have been inspired by Aretha Franklin. You're a soul and gospel singer, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Somewhat. I do other things, but yes, mainly I have done soul and gospel.
Do you sing any songs of Aretha Franklin's?
Do I sing them? I have sung a little bit, but I know that there are other people in the Music Academy that have paid homage to Aretha Franklin by singing songs like Ain't No Way or Rock Steady. So we have, and I've sung background on those songs.
Are you able just to sing me a couple of phrases of one of your favorites?
Yeah, sure. My favorite is Ain't No Way. It goes, ain't no way for me to love you. If you want, let me. Oh yeah, it ain't no way for me to give you all you need. If you won't let me give all of me, oh, it ain't no way. See, just singing those simple songs just get me all wrapped up because she was such an amazing vocalist, and I just wish that one day I'd be able to hold a status such as Aretha Franklin.
Oh, it ain't no way.
Jonathan Lee, 18 years old, studying music, talking to Bridget Burke. Biographer Mark Bego met Aretha Franklin and interviewed her at her home in suburban Detroit for his book, The Queen of Soul. He told me her talent made her great and her background made her strong, including a childhood full of some of the most inspirational figures in American life.
Like Martin Luther King and the great blues singers like Dinah Washington and even Billie Holiday would be friends of her father's because her father was a very prominent preacher in Detroit, especially in the black community. He presided over New Bethel Baptist Church, where she, Aretha, and her sisters Carolyn and Irma got their start singing in the church choir. So she had known Martin Luther King way before his funeral. So he was a personal friend. So it wasn't like she just kind of, latched onto his bandwagon. She had grown up knowing him. So it really was a tragedy, a personal tragedy, when the assassination happened. So she was, of course, front and center for his, funeral. And very close to, obviously, all the Motown stars as well. I mean, that was one of the things about Detroit, the Detroit that Aretha came out of, is all these wonderful musicians were there waiting to be discovered and waiting to become stars. She was lifelong friends with Stevie Wonder and Smokey Robinson, Mary Wilson, Diana Ross, and Florence Ballard of the Supremes. They were all neighborhood kids that she knew. In fact, Mary Wilson had auditioned for Aretha's sister's vocal group. Mary was just telling me stories about Aretha and Carolyn. So it really was kind of a tight-knit circle. And the fact that Aretha joined Atlantic Records much earlier than Motown was hugely successful. She didn't end up a Motown star, but she's kind of associated with all these Motown figures as well because she knew them.
I was just watching footage
all
of
her
her.
life.
I was watching footage of her perform in Amsterdam in 1968, and so the only African American, the only black people at that gig are on the stage. Everyone in the crowd is, you know, kind of young and wide-eyed and white. And I was looking at her, and she's magnificent. I mean, not only is she one of the greatest vocalists that we have ever heard sing, but also she had a charisma and a self-belief. I mean, she is the regal person in that room, and she is owning it. And it was such a powerful statement, wasn't it, to see an African-American woman behaving like that?
It's amazing. I mean, the title, The Queen of Soul for her, which is, of course, also the title of my best-selling book about her. But it's a title that was earned on so many levels. I mean, not only was like she the empress of introducing the world to real soul music, real, you know, where you open up your heart in every song, which is something she became famous for. So, you know, the soul aspect was there, but she really had a regal sort of persona. And as you said, when you were in her presence, whether it was seeing her on stage or for me sitting on the other side of the sofa in her living room, there's no question that she was someone important and someone who was very caring and very sincere and had an aura about her.
Change, 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 change.
Mark Vigo, who wrote a biography of Aretha Franklin. Anyone who loves soul, blues and R&B and who's lived in New Zealand for more than a little while will know the name Rick Bryant. A big man with a big voice and a big love of music. And amongst the musicians he loved and studied and was inspired by, Aretha, of course.
I'd been about 21, I suppose, 22, before I went from a sort of casual listen to a particular track on a particular jukebox in a particular Greasy Spoon restaurant that I used to go to when I was drunk. But before I started playing her albums again and again and again and realising that I was, in effect, studying her, well, everything about it. I mean, I was playing music to enjoy it, but also I was absorbing important singing lessons at the same time. And the more I listened, the more I got addicted. And I got to the point where I knew every lick of every song. To me, it was never a question of any mystery about why I liked her so much. She just seemed to be clearly the best.
This is a ridiculous question because you won't have one, but if there is one Aretha Franklin song that you were going to say to our audience, listen to this because
well,
this
there's one called Didn't I Blow Your Mind This Time? Didn't I blow your mind this time? Didn't I?
Yes, you did, yes, you did, yes, you did. Tell me, didn't I blow your mind this time? Didn't I? Yes, you did, yes, you did, yes, you did.
Rick Bryant. It wasn't just people who knew Aretha Franklin or had a direct connection to her or worked in the music business who were touched by her music. Respect, for example, was released in 1967. I'm the only member of the Checkpoint team who was even alive at the time. I'm delighted to report I was a toddler. Yet we all know it, we can all sing along to it, and we suspected that's not an anomaly. So we sent Zach Fleming and our cameraman Nick Monroe out onto the streets of central Auckland to see just how prolific, how connected, how well known Aretha Franklin's music was.
Do you like Aretha Franklin? Come on. Come on. Just a little bit. Come on. Just a little bit. I'm not going to sing it, but it's a good baby. Sing it with me? It's a good baby. Oh, I'll sing it with you, yeah. Okay. You make me feel. You make me feel. You make me feel like a natural woman. Woman.
What you want?
I put her on this morning, actually, just when I was having a shower.
It's sort of party music, you know. As soon as you put her on, everyone gets up and boogies.
RESPECT. Tell me what it means.
Yeah, to me.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Do you know who sings it?
Aretha Franklin, yeah?
Ah, it's Aretha, isn't it? Yes.
Who sings it?
Aretha Franklin.
She's the queen.
Can you sing it for me?
It's on now.
Sing it, come on.
I'll never hit those notes,
Suck
bro.
it to me, suck it to me, suck it to me.
Yeah, rest in peace, man.
No, I do know it, but
Aretha.
Franklin.
Yes. Good song, right?
Yes. Is she coming over, is she? Oh,
She died this morning.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I like this song. Who sings it?
Queen?
Aretha Franklin.
Oh, she just passed away. Huh?
Do you know this song?
Moment I wake up. Yeah.
Sing it for me.
No, I wouldn't do it justice, no. And wondering what dress to wear now.
You make me feel so good. Oh,
Like a natural woman?
That's it, yeah.
Does this make you feel like a natural woman?
Sure, why not?
Sing it for me.
Do I get a prize?
Sing it for me.
I'm not singing that.
You make me feel like...
She's one of the greatest singers ever. You really want me to sing that?
Come on, come on.
And only a heartbreak for me. That was all right, that.
Yeah, that was good, man.
I don't even need to say her name.
Do you like her music?
Of course I do, and rest in peace, Aretha Franklin.
What do you like about it?
Well, she was just the Queen of Soul, and she's just that voice that's been there forever, you know, since I've been basically born. So, you know, it's just a legend.
Rest in peace, Aretha Franklin, 76 years old. What an extraordinary life. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Have a fantastic weekend.
NZ News headlines at 6:30. Shane Jones says a new infrastructure agency to improve planning and investment will be independent and work across all sectors. Brilliance Steel has been fined $540,000 in the Auckland District Court for misleading customers over steel mesh used for earthquake strengthening. A 24-year-old woman has been charged in connection with the death of a toddler in Waikato Hospital last month. And a LATAM flight, which stopped over in Auckland on the way to Santiago, was one of 9 planes targeted by false bomb threats in South America. Our next news and weather at 7. But first up, this is Trending Now, our feature highlighting the stories you've been sharing via digital and social media. First, this from Catherine Ryan.
Dr Fiona Moyer is a senior lecturer in mental health and communication skills at the University of Auckland. She's done